Honorable Speaker. I will actually take much less than that.
Very good.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to support this particular bill of changing our debt to being nominal terms, to making it a percentage of GDP in present value terms. And I'd like to add probably a new reasoning to it. These nominal terms of having our debt limit to 10 trillion shillings, how does that compare to, say, somebody in the US? If an American investor wants to invest in our government securities and they check about our creditworthiness, the only information they get is that we have a debt ceiling of 10 trillion shillings and our current debt is 9.63 trillion. Remember, this person does not even have the advantage of knowing the strength of the Kenya shillings, and therefore this departure from making it not in nominal terms but a percentage of GDP in present value terms makes a global conversation about our creditworthiness without necessarily being privileged to what is the rate of Kenya shillings versus the dollar, what is 10 trillion shillings, and what is this ceiling about, Honorable Speaker. Most importantly, this puts very good pressure on the executive for this reason. For you to maintain this GDP at the proposed 55% plus 5, and whereas we are at 62, so there are only two options to reduce this 62% to 55 to 60%. You either reduce the borrowing or grow the GDP. So, and because we're not increasing borrowing, then you certainly have to grow the GDP. Now, this growth in GDP will actually mean that we are creating more jobs, that we are collecting more revenues, that we are collecting more taxes, and therefore, it is a step in the right direction to make sure that executive is put into check. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, we've seen a precedent before where money has been borrowed, and reference will be the Eurobond, and that money never got to get into this country. So, if the debt increases without a consequent increase in GDP, it will be a very easy measure that that particular money that was borrowed was not spent in this economy and was not used to grow any particular sector in the country. Because if it were, then it would have led to the growth in GDP. And with that, I beg to support, Honorable Speaker.
Lastly, I'll give to Farah Maalim for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for giving me. Mr. Speaker, this bill is very timely. But first of all, we need to have a provision for us to be able to do a forensic audit of all the money that was borrowed from the day we became independent in this country up to today, and find out how much of it is actually seriously gone into programs of infrastructure in the country or ended up in the pockets of people. Mr. Speaker, unless there are consequences for people who steal from this country, whether it is a debt, through a debt, or it is through the local, the local resources, then of course this thing is going to be always there. The other thing I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, is that most of it was borrowed. We need this forensic audit, both project-wise and financial-wise, for us to know where every coin went. The second thing, it was used a lot of it for infrastructural development in the rest of in Kenya. That's ostensibly the case. We have not had that much infrastructural development in the north. So we need a certain exemption for us to be able to get at least a road from Garissa all the way to Mandera, to Liboi, to Hulugo, to these places. And I think that is one area that I think we need there to be an exemption. If we have to borrow for this, then we'll have to borrow for this. So it's my very humble opinion that what was used before to show the busybodies out there was projects, infrastructural projects. And that has not gone very well in the past. Now, whatever has to come for infrastructural projects, I think we give it to the areas that have been marginalized historically. Now that the equalization fund, we're even sharing it with everybody else, including the areas that were benefited through the sessional paper number 10 of 1965. So there has got to be certain equity and equality and fairness in the manner in which you use some of these debts. Thank you.
Mover. Honorable Member, you heard my direction very clearly, so please spare me the